Hey guys,
Hey, Mr. Higgins, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Good. I was just looking at this incredible piece you just sent over here. Uh, this is great.
Yeah, I wrote
Uh,
that about maybe 6 years ago,
no, it's fantastic.
something like that.
You know Faith, right? Yeah, of course you know
Oh yeah,
Faith. Uh, Wait, is there something you wanted to? Should we promote today before we start talking to Chris or talk
Oh
about in
yeah.
general?
On the 19th, it's Let's Laugh Day, which I think is great, and we could all.
Wednesday. Let's see. Wednesday I won't be shooting yet, so but I'll probably be laughing a lot when I'm shooting on Thursday or Friday.
Well, I'd say we're recording, so let's just go with this. I like it. Uh, Welcome back to Rise and Shine. This is Ability Connection Colorado's podcast, and look at these brilliant graphics. Now you don't see them yet, but I'm going to put them in there. Mark McNett did new brilliant graphics for the show, so I will edit those in here
All right.
after we record this. And we have Faith here, who just told us that Wednesday the 19th is Let's Laugh Day
Yes.
and St. Patrick's Day, so be careful.
Yes. Be safe and careful.
Amateur night, as some of us call it. So be
Green beer
careful.
night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris has seen some things. Yeah, he knows. Uh, and with us today is Chris Higgins. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Now, you mean a lot to us. You mean a lot to the community. People may not know everything you do. Now, I know you have a Higgins and Associates, and how do you describe that to at a cocktail party elevator pitch?
Oh, we do a little bit of everything. But Higgins and Associates, I've had it for 29 years now, and it is an environmental consulting company. We service a lot of different industries: manufacturing, retail, petroleum, oil and gas, communication, aerospace industry.
Uh-huh.
So on a lot of different services. But the one thing that we're really driving right now, and is kind of fun, is we're trying to change an industry, and that is infection prevention in hospitals and associated with hospital acquired infections that are associated with construction activities. And we've just launched a large training program to help the hospitals, their contractors, and people that are working within containments to know how to operate within those environments to protect the patients that are being treated in the hospitals.
I can't wait to tell everybody, how exactly you're connected to Ability Connection Colorado. But I have to say, when you bring this up, how many people reply to you, "Oh, I know so and so that got an infection," or "I got an infection"? I mean, it seems pretty common that.
It does. In fact, my daughter's father in law has been fighting for his life in the last 3 weeks, and he's doing well now, fortunately, from an infection that he acquired from a or a hip replacement surgery.
Yeah. So,
It
well,
happens.
well, I appreciate the work you're doing, and as we do here, because Kathy Higgins, your wife, is on the board of
Yeah.
directors at Connection Colorado, and every time I point a camera at her, she does something brilliant. So, congratulations on marrying up. I think we all have,
I
and
definitely did. There's no doubt about that.
you're doing
Whenever
great.
she does anything, she does that brilliantly. And then I am the adjustment that brings us back to the average on a family.
It's just she's the kite, and you're like reeling her in, like.
Oh, no,
Uh,
no, no, no. It's just my antics.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but
Well, I'm glad that we get to share some now, and you and Kathy together brought us the Straight Shot Clay Shoot. Now we're at the 20th annual
yes, it is. It's
Straight
hard
Shot
to
Clay
believe, but
Shoot in
this is
August.
our 20th year. Kathy and I both shoot sporting clays on a competitive basis. And that was fairly early in our competitive years when we started this. But we wanted to have a charity event that would support something that was close and dear to our heart. And at that time, it was CP of Colorado. And it's now Ability Connection Colorado. And we reached out to them. And ironically, they had just gotten information on putting on a sporting clay event as a fundraiser. And so we connected immediately with them. They thought they would have 30 or 40 people at the first shoot, and we had over 200.
That's the coolest thing, I think, is that you and Kathy, you'd been confronted with a challenge, you'd adapted, you'd thrived, and Matthew's thriving. And then you found a way to make it part of the community, to educate and turn your situation into even more of a positive by raising funds. When I'm at the clay shoot, I'm thinking that the whole time. I'm like, wow, how many people in this world have something that altered their lives and may alter someone else's lives that could do that? That can make an event that brings awareness and raises money.
Absolutely. I could tell you a little bit about Matthew's story. And the article I sent to you is a blog that I wrote several years ago. And I read it again before I came actually home to shoot this podcast with you. And, I still cry. And when I wrote this, I would be there just writing, and I wouldn't even realize that I was crying until, a tear dripped onto my keyboard. And it wasn't that, I was sad. It's how much emotion that I had tied up inside of myself that was pent up. And when I wrote this blog, it released that. Yeah. And to this day, even when I go back, many years later and I read it, it'll do the same thing to me. And Matthew was born, Kathy and I had been married about 2 years. And we had moved from Colorado to Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I changed career. We moved 3 days after we got married. So not only did I change career, I changed in my whole life with a brand new bride and to a completely new locality, 3,000 miles away from our home. And so we were out there by ourselves. The best way to start a marriage. That's my advice to any newlyweds. Leave home, move to another state. You're on your own. But about 2 years into our marriage, Kathy was pregnant, and we were about to start Lamaze classes, and the doctor misdiagnosed her. Said, nope, you're not having contractions. Kathy was worried that she was leaking fluid, and she tested the embryonic fluid, and it said it was not that, and sent her home. And then the contractions got worse, and we went back in and to the doctor again. We had to wait in her waiting room. Then she saw her and goes, "You're having contractions," and off to the hospital we went. And so Matthew was born that night, and he was a 26-weeker in 1990.
Wow.
So, the technology has come a long ways since 1990, but it wasn't an easy way to start life. And he was in intensive care for 3.5 months before we got him out of the hospital. We got to hold him for the first time a few weeks in. He had a grade 4 brain bleed, which is the worst that you can have. He had a staph infection that came on. He had meningitis that happened. There were more than one time when the doctors came to us and said, "He's in God's hands. We can't do anything else." Mm-hmm. And good hands to be in, because he made it through. And it took us 3.5 months to get him out of the hospital for the first time.
Well, talk about that. Here you're on this island, you've moved away, and you come home with a baby boy that, explain, how are you surviving this? Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe this can be done?
Oh, for us, we didn't know any different, Jared. Mm-hmm. This was our first child. I think it would have been a whole lot harder if it had been our second child. Mm-hmm. Because we would have experienced what normal childhood and raising a child was. But this is all we knew. And I know that our preacher at our church asked the same question that you did. How are you holding up? How are you doing this? Because in that entire 3.5 month time period that Matthew was in intensive care, We missed going to the hospital one time in that entire time. And that was Memorial Day. Or actually it was Labor Day, not Memorial Day. He was born in June. It was Labor Day. And our best friend at that time, Dawn Amari, and Kathy is my both of ours. She was a coworker of mine, but she was our best friend in Virginia. She goes, Chris, you're not going to the hospital. I have a sailboat lined up, and you and Kathy and me and a man she was dating at that point in time are going sailing. And I remember walking out, and there was a little bit of bite of fall air, and just a little bit of coolness. And I looked over at Kathy and said, where'd the summer go?
Yeah.
But that was the only day we weren't in the hospital, at least part of the day with Matt.
Well, what have you learned along?
I learned a lot of things. It's been an amazing journey.
Yeah.
In my blog that I wrote, told Matthew's story, I call people with disabilities that have been born or raised with disabilities the invisible people. Because, and I was there, your whole perspective changes when you have a disabled child. And your attention to disabilities becomes to a completely new perspective. But one example would be disabled parking spaces. I remember when I go, why are there so many disabled parking spaces here? Nobody's in them. Now, I look to see if there's a sticker hanging there in the mirror, and if somebody's parking in a disabled place, and I see them and there's not a sticker there, I might make a comment to them.
Yeah.
Your perspective changes. But give me a second. I lost my train of thought there a little bit.
Well, just learning and growing in perspective.
Yeah, but we didn't know any different, but I saw people around us change. My father was pretty much a very intolerant person when I was young, with people with disabilities. And I saw that man completely change with Matthew. He became so much more accepting. In fact, to the point where he was giving and he was reaching out to people. And going back to the invisible people, that's what happens with children with disabilities, adults with disabilities. We have a tendency to turn away, look away. We don't want to look at it. We're uncomfortable with it. But I can tell you the perspective that I have now is those children who have the disabilities, the adults who have the disabilities, all they're wanting to be is accepted. They want to be part of society. They want to be not invisible, but visible. And I have seen Matthew change so many people's eyesight, especially in high school, to where when I was in high school, when I was in school, somebody with Matthew's situation would have been put into a special home or to a state home or something like that. That's what they did with children with disabilities, where today they get incorporated into the school system. I'm not 100% in favor of people who are disabled to being in just the normal classroom because they take a special level of skill set to teach people with disabilities, depending on what their disability is, because it's so varied. Matthew has mental disabilities, he has physical disabilities, and he's also visually impaired. Don't try to beat him at a video game. He will kick your behind. It's amazing what he can do. But he was in the unified basketball program.
That's a fantastic program.
It's a wonderful program. Matthew's not real big. He's got one fairly functional arm and hand. He's got one hand that is not very functional. That it does not bode well for shooting a basketball. but he loved doing it, and he was at every single game, and he was in the program every single year he was in school. And I never will forget this. We were at halftime at Thunder Ridge. It was a high school game, and the unified team for the visiting team was there. The unified team for Thunder Ridge was there, and at halftime they played a game.
Mm-hmm.
And people in the stands knew Matt. Well, Matt had been playing unified basketball for a couple of years. He had never made a basket. And that night, he made a basket. He tossed that ball up. It went right through that hoop, and the entire stand was on their feet screaming. You know, that's how
Well,
getting.
Chris, you got me crying. Look, I'm crying. I'm teary-eyed. We
Try
should have
not
had
to
a bet.
cry.
We should have had
What's
a bet.
that?
Faith, how are you holding up? You
I'm
tearing
trying
up?
not to cry.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh God, I can't. I'm just imagining it. It's fantastic.
It was, and it just, I will never forget that. But Matthew and I talk about his capabilities and his goals in life, and he just wants to be part of it. What he would love to do, and he would be fantastic at it, is being a video game tester.
Mm-hmm.
Because he has the physical, disabilities that he adapts around. And like I said, he plays online against normal adults, and he wins.
I'm sorry about the language he probably must hear, or he's probably already he's saying it himself. Because if he's like my boys, I'm like, OMG.
Actually, he
Language.
controls that pretty well.
Okay, good.
But he would love to experience all of that. But he goes, Dad, this is how God has made me. But I know I've inspired people. And he has such a good heart. He's hardly ever got anything but a smile on his face, as you well know. You know, Matt.
Yeah. Tell him he made me cry. No big deal.
He takes life. He embraces life, and he's clear about what he wants. And he'd love to have a family. He wants to live on his own, and we're working hard to make that happen for him.
Mm-hmm.
We will do that when it's right, and it's safe. But he is an inspiration to me. He's an inspiration to. He's been an inspiration to my family. He's been an inspiration to so many people around. I could go on for hours talking about stories of things that has happened with Matt, and he's one of the probably only people who has been on the back of Shamu without that's not enough trainer.
Wow.
And that was a shunt failure we had in San Diego. We've seen a lot of different hospitals and children's hospitals around the United States. Mm-hmm. Matt has a VP shunt that lets fluid off of his brain, and unfortunately those fail. And when that happens, it's brain surgery.
Well, I have a question based off of a previous episode of ours, actually. So a couple episodes ago, we talked about how over 1 million Coloradoans, am I saying that right?
Coloradans
are likely providing care for a loved one with a disability and or an older adult. So, Chris, my question is, what is something you would like to share with those individuals who are providing care as someone who is providing care for your child?
That's a really tough question, Faith, because everybody is going to respond differently. Mm-hmm. I could tell you that Kathy's and my reactions are somewhat different, but it's hard. We have a lot of dreams for Matt, but as a parent, everything is difficult. I've played ball with Matt before, but it's not like playing ball with your son growing up that eventually goes on to play high school baseball. Your dreams can be shattered. and you have to realize that there's new dreams.
Yeah.
And that is really how we deal with it. It's hard. I don't know if Matt will ever move out. At some point, I'm probably going to kick the bucket before he does. So I guess at that point in time, we're trying to put things in place so that he's always taken care of. But you're never going to be an empty nester, potentially. And that's not easy. But you have to, sometimes you have to reset. You have to step away, take some deep breaths, and then approach a situation again. And a lot of times it's getting help, through associations or whatever. Some people it's counseling. But there is one thing that I have been asked several times, Faith, and that is, would I have wished that it had been different? And that's a tough question. But I say this with all sincerity. The answer to that is no. Not from my perspective. Yes, from Matt's perspective. I wish Matt was going to have a normal life, and along with that come the trials of a normal life. His trials are different. But if Matt had been born normal with no disabilities, he wouldn't be Matt. He wouldn't be my son that I've raised. He would be a different Matt. And it would have been a different story completely. I wouldn't change the story for the world. I've seen how many people, including myself, my wife, my father especially, how it has changed their lives. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that you're going to go, oh, boy, I'm glad that I've got the life that I've got. There's going to be times you're going to go, no, that's not what did I do wrong? Why did I get signed up with this? But you know what? You got to step back. You got to reset. You got to take a few breaths and come back from it from the standpoint of the blessings that you do have. For Matthew, the blessing is that when the doctors came to us and told us about the brain damage, they said he would never walk. He would probably never talk. He would not be interactive. There was just too much damage. And I remember asking, Kathy and I both asked the doctors, well, is there a chance that's not going to be the outcome? And they said, yeah. We don't know enough about the brain to really know what it's going to do. Sometimes some children that have a grade 4 bleed have very few disabilities or none. And others are much more involved than that. And Kathy and I both said at that point, okay, all right. So we got to hope. Good enough for us. We'll go down that road.
That's a good question, Faith. And talked about, Megan of Parent to Parent, her son has autism and epilepsy. She talked about that same thing. The dreams of the parent are different. You are just raised like we all are as an idea of what parenthood is going to be, throwing that ball, riding the bike and stuff.
Yeah.
And it all changes. But I'm wondering, it seems that you and Kathy are bigger, more powerful people through this adversity in being on the board of this incredible organization and starting this event and sharing the word. Like, you are rippling out more than you may have done with a different Matt.
Absolutely. We never would have probably started this shoot, number one, if it hadn't been for Matt. So how many people have been impacted by Matt's disability? People that we don't know. with the money that's been raised that, Ability Connection uses to take care of people like Matthew or people who just, have a hard start in life. So you're right about that. I think it really kind of changes your perspective on things, just as a person, as a human being. I've got a picture of Matthew that's in my office that he's about 2, maybe 3 months old, and he's holding onto my finger. And his fingers do not go around that finger. He's still that small at that age. And I have that in my office for a couple of reasons. But the main reason is when things are not going well, and you think that where's this going to end up? I can look over at that picture and know that I haven't gone through half the things that my son has gone through, and he's got a great outlook on life.
Wow. Well, Faith cried too, so we're 2 out of 3 here. Now we need to get Chris to cry. I've seen it happen.
I got a whole box here.
I appreciate it. And I'm wondering, why is it that I'm crying? It's not a sad story. I guess it's an inspiring story. I don't know what's wrong with me right now. I'm beset with emotional issues.
As I said, when I was writing the blog that I put together, it was pent up emotions that I didn't even know were there. Matt was an adult when I wrote that. Yeah. It's not that, we're dealing with an infant or watching an infant grow up and going through all the surgeries and everything else. This is after Matt has survived all of that and is living a somewhat normal life. And when I sit down and I start writing or talking about it, or even reading it today, or writing another story, I find myself doing exactly what you were just saying, and it's not because I'm sad.
Yeah,
I'm happy that it's a survival story. I'm happy that the Matthew that I have is the Matthew that I have. And I know that the situation could not have been as blessed as it is right now. But even the people who have very involved children love their children. They wouldn't give them up for the world.
This might be too personal, but I'm wondering, and your answer could get you off the hook for Valentine's Day and birthdays if you nail this. But I'm wondering how this has changed your perspective of Kathy and your relationship with her. I mean, you start out a marriage, you're a couple spindly kids on living the dream and have big plans. How has that changed how you feel about her?
How I feel about her, Kathy's always been the number one thing in my life. She is the best blessing I was ever given. So hopefully that'll work on the Valentine's to start with.
Yeah, that's important. I'm going to put a counter right here. So yeah.
I've told Kathy many times, she is far smarter than I am. And, I only think she has ever made one mistake in her life. And
you're killing it right now.
But
you are a straight shooter. My gosh.
It gets me in trouble more than once. I think it helps you deal with the normal things in life differently, because you're bonded, and every couple is different. The divorce rate in families with handicapped children is through the roof. Not a lot of marriages survive it, Jared. There's too much stress. It breaks families apart. It breaks couples apart. Kathy and I have always had a mindset that divorce is never a word that we would ever talk about. And we're both people of faith. And I think that having a handicapped child, a child with disabilities, along with our faith and how our mindset is, helps us deal with the normal things of life easier.
Mm-hmm.
because we've dealt with things that break most people, break a lot of people. Most people's probably too big of a word, but we understand what's really important, and our relationship with each other has to be very good to be able to handle our relationship with our children, which are all grown now.
Yeah.
But you got to understand, on when you've got a disabled child and now a disabled adult, then that also impacts your other children.
That was my next
Well,
question. I know there's people out there that, and I've met them through Ability Connection Colorado. I mean, talk about that. You have another child,
mhm.
and how did that dynamic work, or how did you make it work?
It was probably somewhat unfair to Katie. Um, and that's probably a regret I have in my life, because Matthew had a tendency to always come first with all of his medical issues. So her young years were spent with her brother in the hospital sometimes. Or all of a sudden, mom and dad running off to the hospital on an emergency shunt failure and brain surgery, and Katie gets handed off to somebody. So it really made Katie grow up too fast. But on the flip side of that, Katie is I'm so proud of her. And she is such a strong young lady. And she went into psychology, and she's specializing in mental care for children. And I think that probably comes right from, having a brother who has disabilities, having a brother who has spent a good portion of his life in a hospital having some form of surgery.
Yeah.
What is really interesting is she just had her first child. He just turned a year. And shortly after Landon was born, she came up to us and said, "Now I get it." So,
Well,
but I think it's hard. I think it's hard on the siblings. But boy, you pick on Matt, and you're going to have the wrath of Katie on your hands.
Yeah, I don't want that. And the whole family knows how to shoot and stuff. I just it's funny. You likely know Senator Penfield Tate, as he's on the board of Ability Connection Colorado, and he told me with his daughter, it taught him and his family and the whole neighborhood to understand people better. And likely that's happened with you and most notably your daughter.
Well, it's kind of interesting, and you can take this for however you want to. We moved into a brand new community in the house that we're in right now. We built the house, and our neighbor moved in, and they had a disabled daughter. And then another neighbor moved in just up the street, and they had a disabled son. And the people moved in just down from us, one house down, and she was a pediatric nurse. It's just kind of ironic that we all of a sudden we bonded as a little bit of a community, more so than what you get in a lot of times in suburbia. You might not even know your neighbor's name. In this case, we actually became a unit because of the disabilities that were shared amongst us, and also somebody who was a professional in the medical field.
Who did you, Faith, I keep talking. You got questions for Chris?
Chris has answered all of my questions.
You're
killing questions?
Yeah, you answered all of mine. You just hit all of them in, I think, one question. And so I'm just listening. And if something comes up, I'll I'll ask it, but
Faith and I are just crying while you're talking, so that's why we're here. It's just emotional release. I was gonna ask,
you just can't see what I'm doing on this side.
and you did have that very emotional moment last year when you gave Matt the medal.
oh yes,
Yeah, and I, as a marketing guy, have exploited it regularly.
You have. I've noticed that. Thank you.
Yeah, the clay shoot, but that was a marvelous moment. Talk about that just for a second, because that I mean, you didn't think the day could get any better, and then it just has this. There's this emotional apex where I mean, he inspired this event, and he's there all the time, lifting everyone.
And what you guys didn't know was that was a little bit of a surprise for me as well. So I had the medals, and I was giving out the medals to various people, and they left this last one to the last. And we had been talking through the shoot, and as you know, I'm talking at that shoot all the time, it seems like, and talking about how Matthew was an inspiration. And I did not know that they had an inspiration medal waiting for him.
Matthew, thank you for coming upstairs.
You're welcome.
How are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, I'm good. Other than my legs sore, I'm good.
He's got a sore knee right now. We got the doctor looking at it tomorrow.
Your dad was saying that you're pretty good at video games.
Yeah.
What are you playing right now?
Oh, anything really. Star Wars.
What's your favorite game right now, Matt?
Star Wars.
Star Wars. Well, that's a new one that I didn't know about. It's surely
is it
Zelda. Anything Zelda.
Oh, Zelda. Is this a new version of Star Wars, or is this classic, or what?
Well, it's set in between episode 3 and 4. So
Okay. All right.
it's fun.
Now, Matt can tell you about any video game that you want to know about. Pretty much.
Yeah.
I'm pretty bad at video games, but I'm decent at Mario Kart. It's about the only one.
Yeah.
Well, Matt loves Mario Kart, and we're headed to a shoot in Tucson next week, and he's going to bring his Switch with multiple controllers so that we can be humiliated.
Just remind him who's boss.
Oh yeah. He does not cut us any slack
Well,
whatsoever.
there is time you beat me, so there's that.
Rare.
Yeah.
Rare.
But,
Yeah.
But hey.
But it's not. Yeah, I'm all out when I beat him.
Well, you're competitive, Chris. I mean, I could see that you're not going to be slacking so your son can win.
I would never say that I would unplug the video game right before the end of a race just so I could so I didn't lose. I would never do that.
Nope.
No. The
Well,
dog
Matt,
might be bored.
Thanks for dropping in, sir.
You're welcome.
It was nice to see you. Can't wait to see you in a couple months.
You too.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Yep, you're welcome.
All right.
Well, thanks for coming all the way
Back
upstairs.
to video games.
Well,
Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your time.